It is Monday, the 16th of August 2021. Thank you very much for choosing to begin your day with us here at Metropole Television. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. Join the conversation online at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. I am at Kiage_Simba on Twitter. Let's start with the biggest headlines that you're waking up to this morning. And I want us to go back and look at the unemployment data that we have from quarter 3 over 2020. Now, remember, we still do not have quarter 4 figures, so we can summarize exactly what the effect of the coronavirus pandemic were on the economy for the entire over 2021. What we do know is that indeed, when you go back to quarter 3 of 2020, the official data shows that 1,368,606 as per quarter 3 of 2020 were unemployed. Now, remember, when we're talking about unemployment here, we're looking at those active job seekers. Let me start that definition again. We're looking at those people who have qualified or were qualified to be in the labor market. But at that time, we're looking for these statistics. Then, for 1 month plus, they still remain unemployed. Now, we are looking at this data. If you compare it with where we were in a quarter 3 of 2019, where we're talking about 994,642, and then you compare that with a quarter 3 of 2020 with a 1,368,606, then you will see what the effects of the coronavirus pandemic really have been on the economy. Now, that said, we do have data from the SACCO Regulation Society in Kenya, SASRA, that's the SACCO Regulation Authority in Kenya, that it indicates now that the number of savers who had stopped making contributions to SACCOs jumped 79.5%. from 764,472 in 2019 to 1.372 million last year on the back of COVID-19 economy disruptions. Let's look at that now this morning. We're going to look at the key performance indicators for deposit taking SACCOs as of the financial year 2020. And you can see exactly where we are. That core capital was really hit, and you can see exactly where we are. If you look at net loans and advances also, majority of that was withheld in 2020 as well. That's exactly what we're talking about, because majority of the SACCOs were also sort of coy to release these loans into the economy, because majority of the people were again losing their jobs as well. Now, let's talk about this total assets that we are talking about here this morning. According to the SACCO, we're looking at above 5 billion. Good, that's majority of them. That's by the end of the financial year 2020. And if we got total assets between 1 billion and 5 billion, look at it, that's 23% of the SACCOs that form that block. And when we look at that 5% is the total assets below 1 billion. And now the effect of a majority of the SACCOs that were really affected were the ones that we'll be talking about, the ones that have that total asset below 1 billion. Now, the same thing that we're looking at, that market share of SACCOs as well. When you look at that of the 8% that really have assets below 1 billion, that we're talking about as the ones that were really hit by the coronavirus pandemic, and majority of them were also suffering from this fact of dormant savers. Now, we continue looking at that data before we analyze more data sets this morning. It means that the number of inactive SACCO members jumped 25%. That is of the 5.4 million total membership, compared to 16.95% that was reported in 2019. That's really a bigger percentage there. So we continue again to look at that. It means that if you look at that, then majority of those were the ones who were also contributing to the loan defaults that were among the 175 regulated on the deposit taking SACCOs in the country. But again, if you look at that data as well, it's not all doom, because indeed, if you look at that as well, you'll find that majority of the stable contributors, we're talking about those who are able to continue remitting their contributions or their deposits to the SACCOs, also increased to 5.4 million. Now, analysts will say that this could be a fact that probably the SACCO Regulation Authority also did take in new players like Ushuru, Kimesitu, and Acumen. But if you look at our total assets in deposit taking SACCOs, if you look at this number here this morning, they grew by to reach 627.68 billion in 2020 from 556.71 billion recorded in 2019. I'm also talking about how total deposits also grew 13.1% to 431.46 billion in 2020 from 380.44 billion in 2019. This morning we're going to look at these figures and actually interrogate the SACCO industry in Kenya and ask ourselves the question, why are we talking about majority of the people being in these SACCOs being dormant players, but in reality we are talking about total assets for the SACCOs growing. We're also talking about total deposits to these SACCOs growing. Quite some proper data there, so which seeks proper analysis, especially when we're going to talk about it this morning, so we put those figures into proper context. Quite a good conversation that should beg for you to be around. Now let's look at how universities have been receiving their budgets. We're going to go back to the 2020-2021 financial year, because we do know that figure again dropped in 2021-2022. Now that's where we are, and you can see that jump was only experienced in 2019 and 2020, but then again we started going back again in 2020-2021. We're talking about 94.9 billion that was extended to commercial, to the public universities. I beg your pardon, this morning in the country. Now let's talk about this headline, because yes, we've been talking about how Nairobi University has been suffering because of their budget concentrates in that institution. This morning, Kenyatta University, according to the Auditor General Nancy Gathungu, it had sunk into 1.3 billion in terms of debt. Look at that figure. Now they're saying, according to that report, Kenyatta University has resulted into taking short-term loans to run the activities in the institution. So we'll continue looking at that report that will say that the deficit in that university stood at 677 million. That is the year ending June 2019. Now, if we look at the year ended June 2020, now we're talking about that figure rising to 1.3 billion. Quite a big jump, almost double that figure. Also saying that this is due to the falling student population, that we're talking about this jump, the joint admission admitted boards, and also the self-sponsored students who've been graduating to these universities. Now, if you look at that, they're also pointing out to mismanagement as well. Majority of these universities, what we've seen them doing, especially Nairobi University, is that they've continued to scrap courses and satellite campuses closures as well. They've also revised their education upwards. Now, what we do know, there's also a proposal stated that wants to see the school fee raised from 16,000 shillings to 48,000 for public university students. Now, if you look at Kenyatta University, indeed, that report keeps on saying that as of the year ended in June, the liabilities stood at 6.38 billion. That's a big figure. That is as of June 2020, and that is according to Nancy Gathungu, the Auditor General. They're also saying now majority of these universities are struggling to pay their statutory payments. We're talking about NHIF, the pension funds, and taxes. Now, Kenyatta University by itself, if you look at that, they have failed to pay 3.67 billion shillings in taxes, And look at that audit fee of 8.1 million shillings, deductions over 342.9 million shillings. Again, all this to beneficiaries. Now, we do know is that majority of this, and the government has actually said that they don't have enough money to dispense to these institutions. So it's up to them to be more creative. They go back to exactly what the minister, the CES, Education, told them at the beginning of the year, is that they had to be creative in coming up with resources to run the specific institutions. That's a dire situation now in these universities. If we're talking about Kenyatta University sinking into 1.3 billion shillings debt. And we also have a call from IMF calling for reforms in these institutions. We're waiting to see if this indeed can turn around the running of these public universities. So we don't talk about these headlines this morning of Kenyatta University, for instance, being under liabilities of 6.38 billion as the year ended June 2020. Now, we have two headlines that we're going to put together. But first, let's look at exactly what our wage payments in the public sector have been so far, because KRA and SRC and the Public Service Commission are running two headlines that are somewhat similar this morning. And I'm going to tell you exactly what they are. First, we have to look at this data that we have for you this morning. Now, one thing is going to be clear from this data is that from 2015 to 2019, that's the year ended 2019, our wage payments have been increasing. Now, let's talk about that number really in absolute figures this morning, because we have a bigger story from them. If you look at those wage payments, then you will say that indeed we have had a 45% increase in terms of those wage payments all the way to where we are there and at 2019. If we go back to 2015 to 2019, wage payments have undergone a 45% increase. Fine, we're going to tell you exactly where we are this morning with that headline. And if you look at where we are in terms of public sector servants from 2015 again to 2019, you'll find that within that period we've had 754,200, that is in 2015, to stand at 865,200 public sector servants in the country. Now, how many public companies do we have in the country? Then you will put them at 260 state companies in the country that are able to observe this 865,200 all the way up to 2019. Now, that wage bill has been increasing. Now, let's put those two headlines together and then marry them with the headline that we have for you from the Kenya Revenue Authority this morning. Now, let's start with this one from KRA. Now, KRA, if you're an employee of KRA, and we do know they have 14,000 employees, then you have been awarded an equivalent of a 1 month salary for surpassing your 2020-2021 financial year targets. Now, we do know that they had a 1.6 trillion target for the 2020-2021 financial year, which they have already passed, meaning they're going to enjoy an additional 1 month salary. And this has been approved by the Treasury and also announced by Githi Mburu, the Commissioner General for KRA. Now, let's talk about that. We do know that the KRA commissioners are actually able to take home 1.2 million to 2 million shillings a month. So if they're commissioner, then you do expect to have an additional 1.2 million again as a bonus or a reward for passing your 2020-2021 financial year target. Now, we do know some of them are also able to take home 700 to 1.2 million again per month. Now, we do know now, again, in 2021 and 2022, they are expected to raise at least 2.1 trillion of the 3.2 trillion budget that the country is running at. And now, whether this is going to be achieved or not is bound to be seen. What we do know is that you belong to KRA, then indeed you are enjoying that bonus as you wake up this morning. So congratulations to you. Now let's marry that headline again to what we have this morning. Now let's talk about that. Now, Raila Amolo Odinga did say something on exactly how to improve performance in the public sector. He said that we have to marry what is going on in the private sector. Now, the Public Service Commission and SRC are coming up with regulations just to make sure that the public sector really achieves the performance level that are normally seen in the private sector. And the biggest proposal under this is to run under the reward, somewhat what we've seen, what's going to happen in KRA. Under this, they're proposing that they're going to set targets and monitor and evaluate the public servants, and they're going to come up with a body that's going to make sure that within all these 260 state companies, that they're going to make sure that this body is evaluating individual performance for public civil servants, and under this scheme, they are going to award them with the bonuses. All right, now under that, we do know the data that we gave you this morning. As we look again at that data in terms of wage payment in the country, it's a conversation that everybody has already had on exactly how to bring it down. What we do know, it has been increasing, as we can see from that data again, from 2015 to 2019 has been on an increasing trend, and even the number of public servants has also been increasing in these companies all the way from 2015 to 2019. Now, let's go back and talk about where we are in something that majority of you will not find proper news to wake up to this morning. Now, let's put it in this context. As of 1st of October 2021, you do expect that you're going to pay again more for a range of commodities in the country. But then again, in between that, there are various adjustments that EPRA, now we do know that this is the energy authority in the country, that are saying that they've, in a notice now, they're saying that the fuel cost charge for August has increased to 3 shillings and 77 cents per kilowatt hour, up from 3 shillings and 30 cents last month, meaning that you're bound again to pay more. Now let's talk about how this is going to hit you. Now we're going to call it FCC, the FCC, that is the fuel cost charge that has hit a 3-year high in a shaky economic environment. Now FCC hit similar highs. You have to go back to July 2018 when we did see jump by 4 shillings and 60 cents. Now let me put that for you in proper perspective then. It means that the cost of electricity is going to rise by 14 cents this month. Now, if you're going to pay for 1,000 shillings, you're only going to get 40 units, 0.17 of a unit. All right, that's exactly what it is, from 40 units and 40.37 units, that is last month. Look at that adjustment. Now let's talk about per unit. For you to buy a unit, it means that you have to pay 24 shillings and 89 shillings per unit, from 24 shillings and 77. That is as of last month. So you can see exactly where that adjustment is. Now what we do know is that at the FCC charge had fallen consecutively in April and May, and this was because of those rains that we did experience. But because we've not been having those rains, that charge again has been revised. Now let's look at exactly how you're buying your fuel as of this month again. So we're going to look at those selected fuel prices that we do know is that these are bound to change again if indeed that is revised. Now we do know they have remained the same, but then they might change indeed if this charge is effected again as of 1st of October. We do expect that that is going to change. Also, that is going to be a compound charge that is going to be added on top of this revising by EPRA. EPRA has not really gone deeper to actually tell us why this has increased, but they've just said that it has actually been revised again upwards. Now, what we do know is that the cost of electricity and the cost of energy in the country has been a conversation that has even gotten to the president. Now, what we do know, in March, he did ask for the formation of a task force that was going to look into the power purchase agreements that are bigger electricity or energy suppliers in the country are getting into. Case in point, Kenya Power. We're waiting to see exactly whether this is going to have an effect. But those who have appeared on the National House have said that the cost of power is not high in the country. Do you agree? At Metropole TV KE, across all your social media platforms, that's exactly how we open. We have a lot of conversations around the market this morning as well. We have a jam-packed session for you and quite a good panel that is going to discuss some of these headlines that we've started with. More reason for you to stick around here at Metropole Television. My name is Simbalaji Charles Kiage. We begin shortly with a Monday sector trends.